Hey everybody!
Hey,
Welcome back to Transparent with the Townsends.
What are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about mental health, and you're going to be talking about your stories. I talked about my story last time, and so you're going to be talking about how mental health has kind of impacted you.
Yeah. Last time, Robert got to share his story about his experiences with depression, and I'm going to be talking about my experiences dealing with anxiety and living with and through anxiety. I've also experienced bouts of depression as well, so I'm going to tell my story this time.
Yep. It's definitely important topics. I think we both kind of dealt with a lot, but I think everybody's kind of dealt with a lot in our time frame. I think everybody's dealing with some form of trauma. So I think it's good that everybody's kind of aware that they're not alone in their trauma. Because I think that's the biggest thing. Like everybody is kind of isolated and kind of feels that way. So
I think we're very much more self-aware now than like perhaps when we were growing up.
Right.
You know, like as a society, I think mental illness has definitely been put on the map. And it's not, in some circles, it's still a stigma, but it's not so much of a difficult thing to talk about anymore as it used to be. Because I think more of society is advocating for therapy. And we obviously all just went through a global pandemic.
Right.
So taking care of yourself became a bigger thing than it was perhaps like when we were teenagers or when we were growing up.
I kind of agree, disagree a little bit. Like I agree with you that like we have more awareness now than we did when we were kids, but I still think there's a good chunk of the population that like they're aware of this thing called mental health, but they don't associate it with themselves, even if there's something that they're struggling with. Like because
like it's something that's happening outside and around them.
Right. They're like, that's not me.
Yeah.
That's those other crazy people. And so
I can agree with that.
I think everybody in some form or fashion in this current time frame is dealing with some form of mental health concerns.
Yeah.
Because we're all under attack. And so when it comes to that, like it's good that you're aware of the enemy versus trying to stick your head in the sand. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing.
Yeah.
I think that's why I think it's important that we have these kind of truth talks.
Absolutely.
All
right. So my story, I guess, so I want to preface by saying I feel super anxious just doing this and telling this because I feel like it's one of those things where it's the story that you've been supposed to tell. You know, like I know God has put me or put it in my heart to tell this story for years now. So it feels just kind of weird to actually put it out there. I used to have a blog, so I talked about my struggles and dealing with anxiety before, but maybe not so much in detail. And just to start, I guess I've dealt with anxiety since I was a teenager, probably since I was 12 or 13, when I first started feeling this feeling of like dread. And I guess it's important to say that there's anxiety disorders and then there's anxiety or stress. And I think everyone feels stress. Everyone knows what it's like to experience anxiety in some way, but not necessarily everyone experiences it on a daily basis. So the difference between having an anxiety disorder and just going through or feeling anxiety would be a person with an anxiety disorder will feel the anxiety past the circumstance that gives the anxiety. So for instance, if I'm, afraid or anxious about public speaking, I will feel anxious if I have to be put in a scenario where I have to do public speaking. But when the situation is over, the stress goes away, my body calms down, I'll be fine. A person with an anxiety disorder doesn't necessarily experience anxiety going away. It can be more or it can be less in different situations, but in some way, shape, or form, it's kind of always there as this underlying thing. I sometimes call it like the dragon in my belly because it feels like, something roaring. And I think it's just been there so long that for a long time, I didn't even really acknowledge it. I think as an adult and going through therapy, I am able to talk out with my therapist that it really has always been there.
Mm.
and it lessens and it strengthens during times of, stress or big life events or life changes, but it doesn't ever really go away.
So you feel like certain moments feed the dragon versus
Yeah.
okay.
Definitely, definitely. If there's a lot of things going on in my life or just a lot of changes or new things, it feels stronger.
Mm.
Meanwhile, if I'm like on vacation or if I'm in situations that put me at ease, I feel it less. But I don't think it's never not there.
Mm.
So, yeah, I've been experiencing it since I was a teenager. And I think, and another important point to make is that anxiety is not necessarily something that happens because you've experienced a traumatic event. I think if you go through trauma, it's a higher likelihood that you will experience anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
but anxiety can come as a means of, your personality. It can be genetics. It can be just really
Like OCD?
Yeah. Well, OCD is a version of an anxiety disorder.
Okay.
PTSD is an anxiety disorder. There are different types of anxiety disorders. Panic attacks.
Right.
People have panic
Right.
attacks. That's also a disorder.
I think you having asthma also is probably part of that too, because like if you can't breathe,
I don't know about that.
you don't think not being able to breathe at certain points wouldn't cause you to have like panic attacks or possible anxiety about like.
Well, you know what? I don't know if I ever thought about that. I guess as a child, I was often sick, and my asthma definitely affected me a lot. I was in the hospital like once or twice a year growing up as a kid. But that's actually a good point. I never thought that maybe that would be a trigger for me.
It makes sense to me. I mean, if I can't breathe and I'm dealing with that most of my life, where I have moments where like I may be fine breathing, and then some moment out of nowhere I might like not be able to breathe for like 5 minutes or whatever, however long it is. I don't know how long asthma attacks really go.
Yeah.
But to me, that might be like, I don't know exactly when this will happen again. So for me, I might have a certain moment, like if I feel something building up to that moment where like I felt this feeling before, oh my gosh. So then like anxiety would start to kick in. Like it's like one of those, like your body would start to trigger based off what it remembers as a bad experience.
So that's a real thing. And, I think, like I said, the important part is that you really can't exactly pinpoint all the time where the anxiety comes from. It's kind of an amalgamation of things. It could be that was something that triggered things for me. It could also be your brain chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
So anxiety does come as a symptom of maybe a condition of your body, including your brain, because anxiety exists in the brain.
Right.
And
we're both body and spirit.
Yeah. For me as a teenager, I can't necessarily pinpoint one specific thing that happened to me that started it all, but I just knew it was there and it just continued to be there. And, being a teenager is already a stressful time because you have to go through, you told your story about, you going through depression as a teen and a young adult. And even in those years, our brains aren't fully formed. They're still forming. So for me, it could have been anything really. I just knew whenever I went to school or I felt this kind of pressure to perform, that was when it was worse for me. And, as a teenager, there's always pressure to perform, pressure to be this and pressure to say the right thing and look the right way and dress the right way. And that pressure, I think, elevated to something else for me. And in middle school, it was when it started. But when I got to high school, and I think I had a very bad transition from middle school to high school because, friends left. And I don't know. I just don't know that I handled it well. I think high school kind of shocked me a little bit. And I just had a hard time finding my footing.
I think high school is a shock for everybody.
It probably is. I don't know. Some people transition well.
I think they try to
don't think I did.
They do. Like,
Maybe.
fake it till you make it type situation. But I think high school's a shock for everybody, honestly. Kids are rough.
Yeah. I just remember my freshman year was like my worst year.
Sounds about right.
And I wish I could say it was like normal worse, like normal bad, like, oh, I just got teased or I got picked on or, I didn't fit in, I didn't find my people. But for me, it was those things, but I just felt it so strongly. And I think anxiety was so high for me that I just wasn't even eating very much. I think I lost a lot of weight. Like that was the smallest I've ever been. And I just remember feeling that was the first time in my life that anxiety started to lead to depression.
Okay.
Because I couldn't figure out why I was so nervous all the time or why I was just so shaky, or I couldn't control my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew I just felt very inadequate all the time. And I was so afraid all the time that I would just embarrass myself or say the wrong thing. Or, I mean, it started to elevate to the point where eventually, when I did go see a therapist years after that, she told me that I had social anxiety disorder, which is also known as SAD. And it's basically just this fear of being judged and embarrassed in front of people. So what high school or a lot of high school looked like for me was just staying in a small circle of friends. It looked like me not wanting to raise my hand in class. Like I hated public speaking. I still don't like it. I can do this and talk to a camera, but then I barely even talked in class. Like if you knew me then, you knew I was like a very quiet kid, and I had like my one or two friends that you saw me with, and that was it for me. And looking back on it, I know that I love people, so I'm not necessarily a shy or quiet person. I think I like to listen more than I talk.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's where the quietness comes from, but I've never been afraid or like hated people. You know how people say, oh, I don't like people.
Right.
Like I've always loved people. I find people interesting and fascinating. But what was so depressing for me was that I was so afraid to interact with people. Like I was so afraid to make friendships and to branch out and talk to new people and try new things and just go and socialize. Like the cafeteria was I used to fear going into the cafeteria.
I feel you. The cafeteria wasn't a fun place for me either. So
there were so many people.
Right.
And I was like, everyone's going to be staring at me.
Right.
I don't know who to talk to or who to sit with. Even when I literally was with another friend, I didn't want to go because I just felt like all eyes were going to be on me. And I think that's the difference between stress and like regular anxiety and having an anxiety disorder is that it can be irrational. It can be totally like, why would you think everybody in the world is staring at you? Like, why are you so self-important that you think, and that's what it is. It was just a pattern or a cycle of negative thinking and negative thoughts, and me not knowing how to rationalize that or make it make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't logical, but you couldn't tell my body that.
Do you feel like it was more like you telling yourself that, or just random thoughts coming into your head that kind of made you feel a certain type of way? Like, would you feel like it was more internal or external thoughts?
I think it was a little bit of both, because I think ever since I was a kid, I was very much always caring about what other people thought. Mm-hmm. And I think it just went downhill to the point where my thoughts were consumed by what other people thought of me.
Okay, so I guess my question is, was it internally initiated, or was it like an external thought that initiated the thought, which became an internal thing?
What do you mean external thought?
Like, okay, so I'm saying I have this viewpoint, obviously, that the enemy attacks us by our thoughts. Mm-hmm. And so, like, he'll drop a thought in our head to just, like, basically allow us to think negatively about ourselves and cave inwardly. And so then we latch onto that thought. Whether we choose to latch onto it or not is a big thing, because when we latch onto it, it kind of like you said, I think it can cause us to go into a cycle where it's this vicious cycle internally where we continue to debase ourselves or to put ourselves down. Yeah. And so it's like, I think my viewpoint is like, do you feel like it was externally initiated, or do you feel like you did more of the initiation yourself and the external just kind of reinforced that?
I think it was both, because I don't want to say the basis of it was, but I didn't necessarily have the best friendships at that point in my life. I think I hung around people who also felt like we all had low self-esteem. So I don't think we necessarily knew how to bring each other up and say positive words. And even as a kid, I was teased and bullied because I was like super smart. So I think for me, other people used their words to make me feel less than.
Oh, okay.
But then I did internalize those thoughts where I just did feel less than. And I always kind of felt I couldn't measure up to what other people expected of me. Mm-hmm. I was also a perfectionist. Like type A, even from the time when I was a kid, I was very much like, I have to get this right. And like, I was in gifted program and I did all these projects and I would work so hard. Like I would stay up nights. And I like I said, I think a lot of anxiety has to do with a lot of different factors. My personality was already set up for it because I was a type A perfectionist. I've been that way all my life. You know, I think it didn't help that I also put myself around people who didn't lift me up.
They encourage you, didn't give you uplifting words of encouragement.
Like I didn't have the best of friends. Yeah. I mean, there were some, and I'm thankful to God that there were some positive people in my life. Like my mom has always been an encourager. My sister, my best friend now, and she's been there the whole time. But I don't know. I think the other factors were so much more prevalent, and I think there was so much more negativity, and I fed into the negativity. So I didn't know how to use positive thoughts to overcome the thoughts that I felt. And eventually, I think when I was a freshman, I had to go on meds, and that kind of started my journey with anxiety meds. I started with Xanax, and if you've ever taken Xanax before, you know Xanax is pretty powerful. It'll make you feel good. It will make everything go away. But the meds weren't the problem. It was just healing well, I shouldn't even say healing. It was just taking away the symptom, which was the nerves and the fear, because it was altering my brain chemistry in some form or fashion.
It was just covering up the actual tree of anxiety.
Yeah, it wasn't getting to the root of the problem, which meds never really do, you know? So it wasn't until maybe like my junior year of high school that things really took a turn for the worst. And I think the depression started to outweigh the anxiety. The anxiety that I felt spiraled into depression because I couldn't control it and I couldn't fix it. And I felt like so deeply that something was wrong with me because I couldn't figure out how to just make it go away. And I think that is where we don't give anxiety enough credit. You know, like I know we don't want to, and we don't want to be like, oh, this thing can defeat me, especially as Christians, because it won't defeat you, but it is that serious. And I think sometimes people think, oh, it's not that serious, or people tell you, oh, just calm down or relax. And it's past that. Like if I could tell my own self, calm down, relax, and say all those things and it still doesn't happen, it's past that. Because anxiety is a physical response. It's not just mental. It's not just logical. There's actually something called, and I'm going to be scientific really quick. There's cortex-based anxiety. Your cortex is a part of your brain. And there's amygdala-based anxiety. Your amygdala is also a part of your brain. The cortex-based anxiety comes from thinking and overthinking more specifically. And like you said, that would be more internal because it's my thought patterns. My thought patterns are spiraling out of control. I'm thinking too many negative thoughts. I'm thinking unrealistic thoughts. And that's where the anxiety can come from. Amygdala-based anxiety is more on a subconscious level where your body is trying to protect you against some danger that could be real or not real. And it could be based off of trauma, childhood trauma. It could really just be your body overreacting to any type of stimuli. So for me, especially now as an adult, because I spent so many years in a cycle of negative thought patterns and just things that really freaked me out, as an adult, now my amygdala just reacts and I can be totally fine, but then I start sweating.
It's like fight or flight.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's what your amygdala is made for. It's made to protect you. And I think, you know, back in the old days when we were cave people, it was great because it kept you from dying. Like it's survival instinct is what it is. It's just, it can overreact to something that's not real, like an unreal danger. So I know for me, when I start sweating or I just start feeling freaked out or I feel the tenseness in my stomach, I can look at it and say, like, my thoughts aren't negative right now. Like I'm thinking fine, but for some reason my brain is reacting to something that I don't even know what it is.
Right.
So that's what makes it harder to control. And that's what makes it harder to think it away.
I think, so two things on that. One, just kind of like side note, kind of off the trail. Like the whole caveman thing is like a whole different spectrum. So I don't believe in evolution. But anyway.
Back when we were people who didn't have what we have now.
Right. Yeah, I think more back, you know, Adam and Eve's time and Noah's time with like giants and all the stuff going on. Like the fight or flight was very important, especially I think.
Well, people lived in caves at one point.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
Those the cave people.
I guess, yeah, if you take that route. I'm just saying, I don't believe in like the whole, like,
I didn't say monkeys.
Stupid, dumb cave people.
Oh, okay.
People always been intelligent.
Sure.
Anyway, the second thing was, I think we were watching this was a video, I think it was the Blue Zones show, and they was talking about how they were saying at some point in time, like the fight or flight thing is an important, healthy thing to actually have.
Yeah.
But the problem is when you have it so engaged all the time, it becomes a massive problem.
Yeah.
Because it's an overworked thing at that point versus like only using it for those moments where you actually actively need it. And your body starts to, I guess it gets locked in on that. And anytime you get any type of machine or any type of like part of the body that always stays on, like it's going to overheat or
overworking
it's overworking itself.
Sure.
And so there's no rest from that standpoint. And so then your body will start to feel that as well, not just your mind. And so everything in the body starts to collapse. I won't say collapse, but kind of like.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
That's why fatigue is a symptom of anxiety.
Right.
Because all of that mental turmoil and emotional turmoil is tiring. It's exhausting. As well as depression.
Right.
It's why depression makes you feel like you don't want to do anything.
Sure.
So
we just talked about that in my last video. So.
Yeah. And my experience with depression and anxiety ultimately led me to be hospitalized because I did start experiencing suicidal thoughts. And for me, it wasn't that I wanted to die. It's just I didn't want to live like that anymore. So I cut myself and I had to be taken to the hospital. And I spent a few days there. And obviously, I spent time thinking, like, how in the world did I get here? Am I crazy? Like, what is wrong with me? But ultimately, it was a great experience because the therapists and the nurses that I met there helped me to see that I wasn't crazy. Like, I don't think that I really knew how to describe all the things I was going through because back then we didn't just say, oh, I'm depressed or, oh, I'm experiencing anxiety.
Right.
Like this was the early 2000s. It was like, 2007, 2008. And like I said, nowadays we know the words. We like teenagers know the words. Like they can say, oh, I'm going through depression.
Right. They understand that stuff now.
Now, because that's the culture now. Mindfulness is a thing. Take self-care is a thing.
Right.
But back then it was not. So I didn't know how to handle it. My parents barely knew how to handle it. You know, they were trying to do the right things by, you know, getting me the meds and getting me a therapist. But ultimately, none of us really knew how to deal with it because it wasn't, especially in the Black community.
I actually can, I won't say congratulate isn't the right word. I commend you. Yes, I commend your parents because
Me too.
They did everything they needed to do to help you.
Yeah.
Even if it was outside of the grain of what they were probably used to or what was the norm within Black communities.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really huge.
Oh, I have the best parents. Like, I'm so grateful because I know they didn't know how to handle it.
I'm grateful they did that because you're here.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that experience in the hospital, I think changed my life because I came out knowing that I was going to be okay because the people in there helped me to see that I wasn't crazy, you know? And also, like, I was the only, so I went into the hospital and it was a teen hospital. So there were other teens like me there, basically going through the same things. I was the only Black girl there, which I think for me always made me feel like an outsider because I'm like, I don't feel like other people my age who look like me are going through all this stuff. But they could have been. Maybe they just weren't talking about it. And I got to talk about it in there. And more importantly, there was a nurse in there who, I don't even know why they sent this lady to me. I think I ended up because we did group therapy and we did work with a solo therapist as well and the nurses. And I remember telling someone that I believed in God and I read my Bible because I had this little teen Bible at the time that I'd asked my mom to get me. And so they connected me to this nurse in there. And when she came to see me, she just kind of talked to me. And she was asking me things about what was going on in my life. She was telling me about her life. She was telling me how to deal with like negativity and negative people and how, like, she was probably the first person who realistically told me to read the Bible. Because she started telling me about how she was reading Psalms and how God told David he would do all these things for him and all these things for him to protect him against his enemies. And even now, looking back on it, I don't think that she knows how impactful that moment was for me in my life.
Wow.
Yeah. And honestly, I think I can realistically say without her, like if I had not have encountered her in that hospital, I don't think I would have thought there was help for me. And I don't want to get emotional. I feel it coming, but I don't think I would have thought that there was help for me anywhere. And I would have came back out of that hospital and ended it for good. And that's what I know. So, but look at God.
Look at God.
Look at God. And I know that's why I had to go through that, because what she did for me, I've always felt by telling my story,
Do the same for
I
somebody
could
else.
do for somebody else. Yeah. And you never know. Like, that's just it. We never, because all she did was tell me her story. She told me about something she experienced. She told me about God. She told me about the Bible. And I think in her story, I could see myself in her. That's it.
I mean, the Bible's very clear on that. Like you win and you overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony.
Yeah.
It's his sacrifice for us, and the power in that and his resurrection combined with our testimony.
Yeah.
Like us being true to actually how he has helped us overcome what we've gone through and how he has made an impact in our lives. And I think it's such a small thing that's really huge.
Huge.
It's really huge.
It's everything.
Because it's like, okay, so we think about like how like, oh, I have to do something particular or show something special. But I think there's power in our testimony that we disregard. And then I think there's also like, we don't understand just how impactful it is or how God is working through our testimony.
Yeah.
Because like, it just seems so like ordinary to us. Or it might not be ordinary. It could be something super special to us. And so we hide it because we feel it's very personal to us.
Yeah.
And so
it's too vulnerable.
It's too vulnerable.
It's hard to be transparent.
And so really you have to be courageous enough to be transparent.
Yeah.
Which is what we're all about. And I think it's important because I think the world right now needs transparency more than everything.
Yeah.
Because there's so much hiding and secrets and isolation and depression and mental health issues.
That's the way the enemy wants it.
A lot of that stems, I think, just from like people don't transparently communicate. Mm-hmm. And so for you, the thing that helped you through, to me, it sounds like, through the anxiety and the stress and the depression that you were going through and the suicidal thoughts was the fact that somebody sat down with you and had a transparent communication with you and shared their testimony and their belief in Jesus.
Definitely. And
I think that's huge. Mm-hmm. But it also shows like proof of how simple it can be, and that we don't need to, do nothing super over the top or like just be there in that moment and have a relational moment with somebody where you're vulnerable and transparent and you're able to connect. Like don't be self-righteous and talk down to somebody like, oh, I'm here, you need to get here too, you're so sinful, like hell is waiting, stuff like that for you, versus like, hey, look, we're both, I've been there, I've gone through that same situation, this is how I overcame, Jesus helped me, I read the word, this is the stuff I went through, this is how you can deal with it, this is how I overcame. I'm gonna be vulnerable, let you know what I've gone through, and even, hey, what I might still be going through, but I'm not choosing to give up or lose this fight or to quit life or to hide out and just, be fearful. Like I'm being courageous enough to have this conversation, to connect with people, to choose to follow Jesus.
And also, like I think about this so often, even though it's been almost 20 years since that lady was in my life. And first of all, it was maybe an hour conversation.
Wow.
It was only like an hour conversation.
You didn't have no other conversations with her?
I had never talked to her before, and I had never talked to her after that.
That's crazy.
She literally, even in my memory, and I don't know if this is true or not, or if my brain made it up. In my memory, she's wearing all white. Nurses scrubs, and they're all white down to her sneakers. Her sneakers are white. Like this lady is an angel in my memory.
That is crazy.
I talked to her that 1 hour, and I never spoke to her again ever in my life. She changed my life. saved my life. Like, I know, because what's the likelihood that this woman, a woman of God, is in this place at the right time? Like, someone had to call her to go to come talk to me. Otherwise, I don't think we would have had a conversation. She wasn't a therapist. I had never seen her there, so I know God sent her in this place, the least likely of places. I'm in a mental hospital. It was a mental hospital for teenagers. And here's this woman of God talks to me for an hour and tells me everything that I need to know that I'm going to be okay.
Wow.
I think about that conversation so often. I remember it so well because I wrote about it, because I used to journal a lot. I still do. But I wrote about it in detail because it was just really the moment that changed my life. Like, you had the moment that saved your life.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the moment for me. And I think about all the time how God really is everywhere. Everywhere. Because I was so low in that period of my life. And I wanted to not live anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed up in the least likeliest of places through that woman on that day. Like, what if she would have called out that day? What if she would have not showed up to work? Like, she showed up for her assignment, and 20 odd years later, it's put me on my assignment. Does that make sense? Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
But
I do want to say, just in regards to anxiety, God is there, and what has helped me, because it's not over. Like, I'm not cured. I don't know if it will ever go away, because if it's still the anxiety disorder, then it might not. And that's okay for me. I've accepted that maybe this is my cross to bear, and I'm going to bear it because I know Jesus is with me. The Holy Spirit is in me, and I can do all things through Christ.
Strengthens us.
So I know that I'm going to be okay, even though this thing lives with me. I live with this dragon in my belly or whatever. And there's seasons of my life when it's very high, and there's seasons of my life when it's very low and it's very minimal. But it's there. But I do know God has given me strategies. He's given me support. Thank you for being a support, especially in the seasons when it's high. He's given me a way out, I think. And I think that's somewhere in the Bible. I'll find the scripture for you later. But
God has not given us more than we can bear, but he's made a way out.
Yeah, he's provided a way out for me. He's still that's it. That's the scripture. He's still provided peace and joy. And I've still been able to live a good life, and I'm going to continue living a good life because that's the Lord's plan for me. There are obviously things I have to do for my body just to regulate the amygdala-based anxiety, because you can't just think it away. It's not always a thought. Like, you do need to do deep breathing and exercise, because that's the physical part that's only ever going to regulate that part of the anxiety.
Right. I think as Christians, we need to do a better job of not ignoring our bodies.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I think we have this viewpoint, like, I'm spirit in a fleshly body that I'm going to discard. And this body means nothing, or it's super horrible, sinful body. I want to get out of this body, but the thing is, God made us spirit and body. We are made humans. Humanity is mind, body, soul, and spirit, will, all that stuff placed inside this complete thing. When we are
all one body.
When we are resurrected on the final day with the Lord, we will have new bodies, which means you're not going to be a spirit floating. You will be in a body. This body may be flawed and fallen because of the sinful state of the world and kind of what happened from the whole Garden of Eden aftermath. But the thing is, once the new Eden is put in place in New Jerusalem, we will still have bodies.
Yeah.
So it's accept the fact that we are spirit and body, and all of this is one composite that works together as a whole. And so what the thing is, you still need to take care of your body. Yeah. You can't disregard the body God's given you, because that's bad stewardship.
That's great.
So we need to be able to, if you have a problem, deal with it in your mind and your body.
Yeah.
And your heart.
Yeah. The Bible says our body's the Lord's temple.
Yeah.
You need your body for the spirit to be inside of it doing the work of God.
Right. Worship the Lord with with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, with all your being.
Yeah.
With your body.
Yeah. That means taking care of it, listening to your body, like you said, and anxiety is in your body. It's not made up. If you like I'm sweating right now because I'm feeling anxious about doing this video. Like that's not made up. I'm not making it up in my mind. My body is having a physical reaction. And so I need to take care of my body.
Right.
I need to breathe if I'm feeling out of control. Mental and spiritual is also a part of anxiety. I always pray. I make sure I spend time with God so that I can seek him first. And I put him on the pedestal so that all the other things, the worry, all that stuff can go away.
Magnify him.
Because, as they say, you can't worship and worry at the same time, or worry is worship, but it's worshiping the wrong thing. So I just try to make sure I'm worshiping the right thing first. I know the other thoughts are going to come. I know my body's going to start doing whatever it needs to do. It's going to do it. But I try to keep my mind focused on what's true.
Right.
And what I know is true.
Lay it to the altar of the Lord.
Yeah. Surrender. I think that's literally the biggest piece in dealing with anxiety. Surrender, surrender, surrender. Because the more I try to fight it, the worse I feel. I can feel bad, or every time I felt depressed about the anxiety, it was because I felt I couldn't make it go away. And I can't fight it. I just need to accept that it's here, that I'm okay because God is taking care of me, and that he's still going to have his way in me and in my life, no matter what the enemy tries to do.
Right. I think you said something out there that was very key. You said, I thought that I could make it go away. And I think in the control culture that we're in, and you being type A, and I talked to a friend about this, we're in a society where we love control so much, and we want to control so much that like we think we can control all aspects of things. And part of it is like surrendering to the fact like you can't take the anxiety and stress away. I could not take my depression away. Yeah. Like the only one who took it away was Jesus.
Yeah.
And the only one who can take it away is Jesus.
Yeah.
And so it's like, Lord, I'm okay if I'm in this with you, if we're going through the shadow of the valley of the shadow of death, if we're walking through this, that's fine. Like, cause I know I'm walking with you.
Yeah.
Like if it's overcome in this lifetime, awesome. Yeah. I glorify you. If it's not, I glorify you because you're doing something in the midst of me still being here.
Yes.
Like something is being, it's not for, you're not doing something to me, you're doing something for me. Like this is either building up something in me, endurance wise or spiritually, or focusing me on you, or allowing other people to like, it's not sometimes not about you. It's about like, hey, you being able to go through this and focus on Jesus, allowing somebody else to be like, I'm going through the same thing. I can focus on Jesus too, because I see you and you have an impact in my life in other ways. And I didn't know this about you. And I've learned that you're going through the same thing I'm going through, and you don't give up. You don't choose suicide. You don't, decide to forsake Jesus. You still follow him regardless of the pain and the issues and all the stuff that's going on. And so for that example is huge. I think we were watching The Chosen, and it was the episode that I thought it's obviously not technically, that one wasn't scriptural, but I thought it was very huge because I think Philip he has some type of injury or whatever he's been dealing with his whole life. And so there's a moment between him and Jesus, and he asks Jesus, he says, this is a moment about like, is he going to heal him? He's like, look, you never healed me. And he's like, do you want to be healed? And then Philip's like, well, I mean, you never did it. And he's like, do you want to be healed? Like, you never asked me. And he was like, well, will you heal me? And he's like, well, before I answer that question, I want to ask you, do you think it would make more impact for the people around you for you to get healed? Like, I mean, that'd be a great story. I mean, but this is one of many. Like, I've healed many people of their healings. Or do you think it'd be even more of an impact if I don't heal you right now and you go through your life and people see that regardless of the fact that you did not get healing, you still praise me. You still praise the Father. Yeah. He's like, me and the Father trust you enough with this that we know that you won't forsake us because of the fact that we don't heal you right now. We trust you with this assignment.
That's great.
And I can tell you that you will receive your healing in the afterlife. Mm-hmm. And so at times I think a lot of people don't like that whole aspect of like, oh snap, this might be an assignment for me. That Jesus is trusting enough in me to be like, that I can go through this. But it's not like I'm going through this alone. It's like I'm going through this with his power and his grace and Holy Spirit strengthening me. Yes. I don't think people like the idea of struggle.
No.
Or pain. So I think that's a bigger problem. But I think our pastor talked about this as far as like it's weight allows you to build strength. So it's like if I don't actually go through the pushing up of the weight or having the weight on me, I'm not going to be able to build endurance and strength to be able to fully work. So I think there's
builds that muscle.
Right. I think Paul talks about it as far as like the trials come to build endurance and strength and character and allow us to be able to, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I want to kind of segue that into like, I think some form of like endurance of those things not only builds a character, but allows us to be able to bear the weight of the assignment that he's walking us into. Like if you're not able to kind of handle certain stresses, obviously the pressure of leadership is going to collapse you, or you're going to be corrupt, or you're going to fall to the whims of, other people who are corrupt. And so it's like, okay, cool. If I've already gone through the trials and struggles and pains and different things like that, I can better not only minister to other people because I can give my testimony that's going to have an impact. I can understand and have empathy, and I can be able to connect with people, but also I can handle what's coming my way.
Yeah.
He has the foresight. I just have to trust his foresight, regardless if it sucks in the moment.
Yeah. I think if we can look at it as though, and I don't know if this is scriptural, I think there is a scripture that says something like this, but it's not happening to us, it's happening for us.
Yes. I think, okay.
And for other people, for other believers around the world.
I didn't like discipline. Like when my parents would be like give me a hand pop, or like I had to stand in the corner or stuff like that. But I can tell you now, I'm thankful that they did discipline me because I learned how to be a better person. Like they did not spoil me as a child. Like I wasn't like spoil the child, spare the child, spare
the rod, spoil the child.
Yes. Like I was disciplined and I was allowed to kind of see how I was supposed to behave, which allowed me to be able to be the person I am now, which allows me to walk in a certain manner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the things you go through, I did not like that stuff. Nobody likes the whole punishment, take your phone away, all that stuff like that. But the thing is, that stuff prepares you to handle responsibility when it comes and not be just, controlling or crazy or, how
God has to know you can handle it.
Yes.
So
he's not going to give you what you can't handle.
Right. He tests us, but
he
provides a way out.
So that's why the tests and the things, the trials are there to kind of help endure and grow your strength.
Sure.
And I think, I know what I went through helped. I talked about this in the last video. What I went through helped to build me to be the man that I am for you and be the best husband I could be.
Yeah.
Would you say the same?
I would like to say it's the same thing here. I wouldn't be who I am today without all of that, without even going through it now. Wouldn't be doing this, that's for sure. So I know we've been talking for a long time, but if you made it to the end of this video or the audio, thanks for talking with us. Thanks for letting me share my story. I hope in some way, fashion, or form, it has inspired you or shifted something in you. The way it transformed and changed me. And it is National Mental Health Month. So if you do need to reach out to someone or a therapist or us, we have an email, transparentwiththetownsends@gmail.com. If you just need to talk about some stuff, something heavy. We are not trained therapists or licensed therapists, so we cannot assure you that we're going to give you medical advice, but we'll give you spiritual advice, and we can always pray for you too. So
so did you want to drop a question in the comments for people to answer?
Sure.
So sorry, this is off the top of my head. I guess question for you guys. How do you feel what you have gone through has helped you to be the person that you are today? How's God allowed that to build who you are today?
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for hanging with us. Thanks for listening to us. And we love you. God bless.
See you later. Hey guys, thanks for watching our video.
Thanks.
If you saw value in what we talked about and you want to see some more stuff, check out our other videos.